The billionaire husband's stepmother sent the wife intimate photos of her and the husband and laughed at her pain. She said nothing. At a family gathering, the wife had those photos framed and pasted everywhere in the hall. But before that moment of reckoning came, there was a life, a beautiful, broken lie of a life, that had to shatter first. Kira Caldwell sat on the porch of her craftsman-style house on the outskirts of Maple Falls, watching the golden evening light paint the quiet Midwestern town in shades of amber and rust. To anyone passing by, she had it all. A brilliant black surgeon, respected at the local hospital, married to Weston Caldwell, heir to one of the wealthiest families in town. The local press had called them a fairy tale, the humble girl from the tight-knit black neighborhood who'd risen to marry the charming billionaire's son. But fairy tales, Kira was learning, often hide monsters in plain sight. She'd been raised by her grandmother in a world of Sunday church services, soulful cookouts, and neighbors who looked out for one another. Faith, community, integrity, these were the pillars of her childhood. Weston's world, old money, cold elegance. His father, Howard Caldwell, was a prominent businessman, respected and distant. After Weston's mother died, Howard remarried. That's when she entered the picture. Vanessa, glamorous, young, in her early 40s, but looking 10 years younger. She became the new matriarch of the Caldwell household, and from the moment Kira entered that world, she felt Vanessa's eyes measuring her, weighing her, and finding her lacking. The looks were subtle at first. A raised eyebrow, a thin smile that never reached those cold blue eyes. But Kira felt it, that invisible barrier between her and acceptance. She tried. God knows she tried. She approached Vanessa with warmth, with respect, with genuine effort to build a bridge between their different worlds. But nothing was ever good enough. Every gesture was met with polite frost. Every attempt at connection left her feeling smaller. And Weston? He brushed it off. "She'll come around," he'd say, scrolling through his phone, barely looking up. Just give her time. So Kira swallowed her concerns and told herself love would be enough. That patience would win the day. But beneath the surface of her seemingly perfect life, something was rotting. The cracks truly showed themselves one summer evening at a family dinner. The Caldwell mansion glittered under crystal chandeliers as Howard and Vanessa hosted an elegant gathering. Kira arrived with a homemade sweet potato pie, her grandmother's recipe, a piece of her culture, her heritage, offered as a gift. She hoped it might warm the ice between them. The dinner started pleasantly enough. Howard asked about her work, and Kira recounted a challenging surgery where her team had saved a patient's life. She could see the respect in Howard's eyes. But before he could respond, Vanessa's voice cut through the moment like a knife wrapped in silk. "Dr. Kira is quite dedicated to her job," Vanessa said, smiling at the other guests with practiced grace. "It's admirable, though I keep reminding her she should take more time off to focus on family. You know how careers can be, all-consuming." Her gaze flickered, just for a heartbeat, toward Kira's midsection. The implication landed like a slap. 3 years of marriage, no baby. In Vanessa's eyes, Kira was failing her duty to the Caldwell legacy. Heat rose in Kira's cheeks, but she kept her voice steady. "Family is very important to me. Weston and I have our hopes for children when the time is right." Under the table, she squeezed Weston's hand, seeking solidarity. He offered a perfunctory smile but said nothing. Not a word in her defense. Not a single syllable to acknowledge Vanessa's cruelty. And in that silence, something inside Kira began to break. The insults continued through the courses. Vanessa praised the chef's dessert as heavenly and refined, adding with a pointed smile that not everyone's palate could appreciate such sophistication. She commented on a recent charity gala, noting how some people in their circle didn't quite have the taste to fit in. Each remark was sugar-coated venom, and the other guests shifted uncomfortably, sensing the hostility beneath Vanessa's perfect hostess facade. After dinner, Kira excused herself to help clear plates, a gesture of kindness that made Vanessa raise an eyebrow at her daughter-in-law performing servant's work. As Kira returned toward the living room, she heard voices. Low, hushed, and then she heard her own name. She paused behind the partially closed door, her heart beginning to pound. Vanessa was speaking to one of the family friends by the fireplace, unaware that Kira stood just around the corner. "Weston could have done so much better for a wife," Vanessa said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Someone who really fits in with our circle. But at least Kira is a pretty little ornament to keep him occupied. A pretty little ornament." The words hit Kira like a physical blow. Her throat tightened. Her eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall where anyone could see. This wasn't just one insult. This was confirmation. In Vanessa's eyes, she wasn't a person. She was decoration, a thing to be tolerated, but never respected, never loved, never accepted. That night, lying next to her softly snoring husband in the darkness, Kira stared at the ceiling and replayed every moment. Every subtle insult, every dismissive glance. Every time Weston had chosen silence over standing up for his wife, she whispered a prayer into the midnight silence. "Lord, grant me patience and wisdom. Help me be strong and do what's right." Then she cried into her pillow until exhaustion dragged her into fitful sleep. She didn't know it yet, but far worse betrayals were waiting in the shadows. In the weeks that followed, something shifted. A colleague mentioned seeing Weston at Le Chateau Bistro, a romantic restaurant. On a Saturday he'd claimed to be golfing. Then came the late-night texts, the private phone calls, the growing distance, and one night, as Weston showered, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. Kira's hand moved before she could stop herself. The message preview glowed in the darkness. "Tonight was lovely. Sleep well, darling." The sender, Vanessa. Kira's blood ran cold. The pieces were falling into place, a horrifying, impossible puzzle. Could her husband be having an affair with his own stepmother? And if so, what was she going to do about it? The text message glowed in the darkness like a confession written in light. "Tonight was lovely. Sleep well, darling." From Vanessa to Weston, Kira's husband, his stepmother. The phone trembled in her hand, or maybe it was her hand that trembled. She couldn't tell anymore, because in that moment, standing in her bedroom while shower water ran in the bathroom and her husband hummed a tune she didn't recognize, Kira's entire world tilted on its axis. The question wasn't whether something was happening between them. The question was, how long had this been going on, and what was she going to do about it? She set the phone down exactly as she'd found it, screen down, positioned at the same angle. Her medical training kicked in, steady hands, controlled breathing, clinical detachment. But inside, she was screaming. Weston emerged from the bathroom minutes later, steam billowing behind him, a towel around his waist, looking like the man she'd fallen in love with. But was he ever that man? Or had she married a stranger wearing a charming mask? He climbed into bed beside her, kissed her forehead with lips that might have kissed Vanessa hours before, and fell asleep within minutes. Kira lay awake until dawn painted the windows grey, her mind a hurricane of questions she couldn't answer alone. By the time morning light crept across their bedroom floor, she'd made a decision. She needed proof, not speculation, not suspicion. Cold, hard, undeniable evidence. Because here's what Kira understood that morning, lying next to her sleeping husband while her world crumbled. If she confronted them without proof, they'd deny it. They'd gaslight her. They'd make her feel crazy, paranoid, jealous, a bitter wife imagining things. Vanessa would widen those cold blue eyes in wounded shock. Weston would look at her with disappointment, maybe even anger at such an accusation, and she'd be left standing there, doubting her own reality, apologizing for suspecting the unspeakable. No, she wouldn't give them that power. If this was happening, if her husband was betraying her with his father's wife, his own stepmother, then the whole damn world would know the truth. At the hospital that week, Kira moved through her shifts like a woman underwater. She performed surgeries with her usual precision, made her rounds, consulted with colleagues, but it was all mechanical. Autopilot. Her real mind was elsewhere, churning through the possibilities, replaying every interaction she'd witnessed between Weston and Vanessa. Those private jokes that excluded everyone else. The way Vanessa's hand would linger on Weston's shoulder just a beat too long. How Weston jumped to help her with every little thing, getting her coat, refilling her wine glass, laughing at comments that weren't funny. Kira had thought he was being a good son, dutiful, respectful. But what if it was something else entirely? What if those touches, those glances, those moments of intimacy she'd dismissed as familial were actually more? The thought made her physically ill. She'd excused herself from a consultation once to vomit in the staff bathroom, bracing herself against the cold tile wall, wondering how her life had become this nightmare. This wasn't supposed to happen to her. She'd done everything right, worked hard, stayed faithful, loved her husband, treated his family with respect even when that respect wasn't returned. And this was her reward. Betrayal wrapped in the most twisted, taboo form imaginable. 3 days after seeing that text message, Kira made a phone call to a private investigator she knew from her hometown. Marcus had grown up in her grandmother's neighborhood, gone on to work in security and private investigations, and he was someone she trusted implicitly. When she called him, her voice was steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Marcus, I need your help. I think my husband is having an affair." "I'm sorry to hear that, Kira. Who do you think it's with?" The pause that followed felt like falling. Then, his stepmother. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long she thought the call had dropped. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice careful. That's serious, Kira. You sure about this?" "I'm not sure about anything. That's why I need you. I need to know the truth, Marcus. Whatever it is, I need to know." He agreed immediately, told her he'd start surveillance that week, warned her that once she knew the truth, there was no unknowing it. She thanked him and hung up, then sat in her car in the hospital parking lot and cried so hard her chest ached. Because part of her, a small, desperate part, still hoped she was wrong. Still hoped there was some innocent explanation. Still hoped her marriage could be saved. That hope died 4 days later when Marcus called. "Kira, I've got what you need, but I want you to sit down before you look at these." His voice was gentle, the way you'd speak to someone about to receive devastating news. She was in her home office, the small house she'd kept and rented out after marrying Weston. She'd come here to be alone, away from the Caldwell estate, away from the suffocating presence of a life built on lies. "Send them, Marcus." The email arrived 30 seconds later. She clicked on the first attachment and felt the room tilt. There, in high-definition color, was her husband and Vanessa, outside a luxury hotel. Weston's hand was on the small of Vanessa's back, intimate and possessive. The next photo showed them in the hotel lobby, checking in. The timestamp read 2:47 p.m. on a Wednesday, a day Weston had told Kira he was in meetings all afternoon. The third photo captured them in a corridor, Weston pressing Vanessa against the wall, kissing her with a passion Kira hadn't seen from him in months. But it was the fourth photo that broke her. Taken through a hotel room window with a telephoto lens, it showed Weston and Vanessa in bed together, partially undressed, their bodies entangled in sheets, their faces visible and undeniable. Weston's hand was in Vanessa's hair. Her lips were on his neck. They looked at each other with an intimacy that spoke of repetition, of routine, of a relationship that had long since passed the point of a single mistake. Kira's hands shook so violently she nearly dropped her phone. She scrolled through the rest, 18 photos in total, each one more damning than the last. Photos of them at Le Chateau Bistro, holding hands across a candle-lit table. Photos of them entering Vanessa's private townhouse. Yes, she had a place separate from the Caldwell mansion. Somewhere she could have privacy and independence, she'd told everyone. Now Kira understood exactly what kind of privacy Vanessa needed. There were timestamps, locations, dates spanning back 3 months. 3 months of documented evidence. But Kira suspected it had been going on far longer than that. She sat in that chair for 2 hours, unable to move, the laptop screen glowing with proof of her husband's betrayal. The tears came in waves. Anger, grief, humiliation, rage. How could he? How could they? The wrongness of it went beyond simple adultery. This was his father's wife, the woman who was supposed to be a mother figure to him. The age gap alone made it disturbing, Vanessa was in her early 40s, Weston was 30. But more than that, it was the violation of every natural boundary, every social taboo. It was grotesque, perverse, and it had been happening right under her nose, while Vanessa smiled at her across dinner tables and made her feel like an outsider, like she didn't belong in their world. Because that's what this was really about, wasn't it? Vanessa hadn't just wanted to exclude Kira from the family. She'd wanted to replace her, to take what was Kira's, to prove that even Kira's own husband preferred Vanessa, preferred the glamorous, sophisticated white stepmother over his black wife. The racial dynamics of it hit Kira like another blow. Was that part of Vanessa's sick game? Proving she could seduce Kira's husband, proving that Kira never really belonged in their world, that she was just a temporary intrusion that could be discarded. The rage that bloomed in Kira's chest in that moment was righteous and terrible. She'd been raised to turn the other cheek, to pray for those who persecuted her, to let God handle vengeance. But God also gave her a mind, a will, and a sense of justice. And if there was ever a time for truth to come to light, this was it. She called Marcus back. I need printed copies of everything. High quality. And I need them in 3 days. You got it. Kira, what are you planning? I'm planning to tell the truth, Marcus, that's all. Just the truth. After she hung up, Kira knelt by her bed in that small house and prayed. Not for patience this time, not for understanding. She prayed for strength, for clarity, for the courage to do what needed to be done. Lord, you know my heart, she whispered into the empty room. I take no pleasure in what must be done, but I cannot let evil reign in the shadows. Guide my steps, give me strength, and let justice be served. When she stood, she felt different, calmer, more focused. The tears had stopped. The shaking had ceased. In their place was something harder, something unbreakable. Vanessa and Weston had declared war on her dignity, her marriage, her place in this world. They just didn't know it yet. But they would soon find out that Kira wasn't the meek, accepting victim they'd assumed she was. She was a surgeon. She was trained to cut away diseased tissue, to remove what was poisoning the body. And this secret, this festering wound at the heart of the Caldwell family, needed to be excised, publicly, completely, and without anesthesia. But how? That was the question that consumed her over the next 48 hours. She couldn't just show Howard the photos privately. Vanessa and Weston would deny it, manipulate him, turn it around somehow. She couldn't confront them directly. They'd close ranks, lie, maybe even. Turn the family against her for making such outrageous accusations. No, this required something more. Something undeniable. Something public enough that there could be no spinning it, no covering it up, no making it disappear. The answer came to her during a conversation with Howard's cousin, Evelyn. Evelyn was one of the few Caldwell family members who'd always been genuinely kind to Kira, who'd never made her feel like an outsider. They were having coffee at a small cafe in town when Evelyn mentioned the upcoming family gathering. Howard's planning quite the event for Weston's promotion, Evelyn said, stirring cream into her cup. Vanessa's already been at the mansion for days, decorating, planning the menu, ordering enough flowers to fill a cathedral. You know how she loves to put on a show. Kira's hand froze halfway to her own cup. The family gathering. When is it exactly? Next Saturday. Evening affair, very formal. Half the town's elite will be there, plus all the extended family. Why? Just curious, Kira said, her mind already racing. Will they be doing any presentations, speeches? Oh, absolutely. Howard's planning a whole thing. Speech about Weston's achievements, a slideshow of family memories, probably some toasts. You know, the usual proud father routine. Evelyn paused, studying Kira's face. Are you all right, dear? You look pale. Kira met her eyes. Evelyn, can I trust you with something? What followed was a careful conversation. Kira revealing just enough to gain Evelyn's help without showing all her cards. She told Evelyn about the affair, showed her 2 of the photos on her phone. Evelyn's reaction was everything Kira needed to see. Horror, disgust, immediate rage on behalf of both Kira and Howard. That woman, Evelyn hissed, her genteel southern manners evaporating. That vile woman. And Weston? How could he? "Will you help me?" Kira asked quietly. "Tell me what you need." The plan came together piece by piece, like a surgery, methodical, precise, each step dependent on the one before. Marcus would provide high-quality printed photos in elegant frames. Evelyn would help Kira access the mansion the day before the event, when Vanessa would be out coordinating with caterers and florists. They would replace strategic family portraits throughout the main gathering spaces with the affair photos, carefully, so they wouldn't be noticed until the right moment. Kira would also get access to the slideshow presentation, where she could insert her own images into the queue. "It's risky," Evelyn warned. "Once you do this, there's no taking it back. The family will never be the same." "The family's already not the same," Kira replied. "It's just that only 3 people know it. After Saturday, everyone will know the truth. No more lies, no more secrets. No more letting them get away with this." "What about Howard? His heart?" "I know." This was the part that haunted Kira. Howard was a good man, despite his emotional distance. He didn't deserve this betrayal from his wife and son. The revelation would devastate him. But what was the alternative? Let him continue living a lie. Let Vanessa keep playing the devoted wife while she carried on with his son. Let Weston keep pretending to be the dutiful heir while he violated every moral boundary. No, the truth had to come out. Howard deserved to know, even if it broke him. "I'll be there," Evelyn said finally. "For you, and for Howard. Someone needs to be ready to help him through what's coming." The days leading up to the gathering felt surreal. Kira moved through her normal routines, work, home, brief interactions with Weston, like an actress playing a role. At dinner with Weston, she smiled and asked about his day, all while knowing exactly what he'd done that afternoon. Marcus had sent her a new photo, Weston entering Vanessa's townhouse at 3 p.m., not leaving until 6 p.m. 3 hours. While Kira had been in surgery, saving lives, her husband had been with his stepmother, betraying every vow he'd ever made. The night before the gathering, Kira couldn't sleep. She lay in bed next to Weston. He'd be sleeping in this bed for the last time, though he didn't know it yet, and thought about everything that had led to this moment. The romance that had seemed like fate, the wedding that felt like a dream, the gradual realization that she'd never truly been accepted by his family, Vanessa's cruelty, Weston's complicity, the affair that mocked everything she believed about love and loyalty and family. Was she doing the right thing? The question whispered through her mind like doubt. Exposing them so publicly, so dramatically, was it justice or revenge? Was there a difference? She thought about what her grandmother would say. Nana had always taught her that the truth was sacred, that lies poisoned everything they touched. "Baby girl," she used to say, "you can't build nothing solid on a foundation of lies. Eventually, it all comes crashing down. Better to live in truth, even when truth is hard, than to live in a beautiful lie." Kira knew what she had to do. She rose before dawn, while Weston still slept, and knelt by the bed. "Lord, I'm about to shine a light into some very dark places," she prayed quietly. "I don't know what will happen, but I know I can't stay silent. I can't let them keep doing this to Howard, to me, to this family. Give me strength. Give me courage. And if I'm wrong, if there's another way, show me now." No other way revealed itself. At 7 a.m., Kira got ready for her shift at the hospital, kissed Weston's forehead goodbye like she always did, and drove away from the Caldwell estate. She didn't know it then, but she would never sleep under that roof again. That afternoon, while Kira was supposedly at work, she and Evelyn entered the Caldwell mansion through a side entrance. Vanessa was across town and Howard was at his office. They had 2 hours. Marcus had delivered the framed photos the day before, 18 of them, printed on high-quality paper, placed in expensive frames that matched the mansion's decor perfectly. To a casual observer, they'd look like they belonged there. Kira's hands were steady as she worked. She removed a portrait of Weston's mother from the mantel in the living room and replaced it with a framed photo of Weston and Vanessa kissing outside the hotel. She took down a picture of the Caldwell family from a prominent wall position and put up an image of Weston and Vanessa holding hands at the restaurant. In the hallway leading to the main gathering space, she swapped family vacation photos for images of the affair. intimate, undeniable, impossible to explain away. The slideshow was trickier. Vanessa had password-protected the laptop that would run the presentation, but Evelyn knew Howard's passwords. He used the same ones for everything. They accessed the file, and Kira carefully inserted her photos into the sequence. She positioned them to appear about 10 minutes into the presentation, right after the heartwarming childhood photos, right when everyone would be relaxed and smiling. The timing had to be perfect. "Are you sure about this?" Evelyn asked one more time as they finished. Kira looked around the mansion, the elegant furnishings, the crystal chandeliers, the trappings of wealth and status that had never made her feel at home. "I've never been more sure of anything." They left as quietly as they'd come. That night, Kira barely touched her dinner. Weston noticed. "You feeling okay? You've been quiet." "Just tired," she said. "Big surgery today." He nodded, already looking back at his phone. Already texting someone. Vanessa, probably. Planning tomorrow's event. Coordinating their secret rendezvous while Howard and the guests celebrated. The audacity of it still took Kira's breath away. How did they do it? How did they look Howard in the eye, accept his love and trust, and then sneak away to betray him? How did Weston kiss Kira goodnight with the same mouth that had kissed Vanessa? How did any of them sleep? Saturday arrived with perfect weather, clear skies, mild temperature, a beautiful evening for a party. Kira spent the day preparing herself. She chose her outfit carefully, an ivory cocktail dress that was elegant but not flashy, sophisticated but not trying too hard. She wanted to look like she belonged at this event, even though she was about to tear it apart. Her makeup was natural, her hair swept up in a simple style. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. This version of Kira was harder, colder, more dangerous. At 6 p.m., Weston knocked on her door. "Ready?" "Ready." They drove to the mansion together, Weston chatting about the promotion, about how proud his father was, about how this was a big step for his career. Kira listened and smiled and made appropriate responses, all while the small remote control sat in her purse like a loaded gun. She'd programmed it to override the slideshow controls, giving her the power to start the incriminating sequence whenever she chose. Control. That's what this was about. Taking back control of the narrative, of her life, of the truth. The mansion glittered with lights when they arrived. Valets parked cars. Guests in elegant attire moved through the front entrance, where Vanessa stood in a stunning red gown, playing the perfect hostess. She kissed Kira's cheeks when they arrived, both of them European style, and whispered, "Don't you look lovely, dear?" The same woman who was sleeping with Kira's husband. The same woman who'd called her an ornament. Standing there, air-kissing her, pretending everything was fine. Kira smiled back. "Thank you, Vanessa. You've outdone yourself with the decorations." If Vanessa noticed the replaced photos yet, she gave no indication. The frames were positioned strategically, not immediately obvious, but impossible to miss once the lights were properly adjusted and people started looking around. It was a time bomb, ticking down to the moment of revelation. Dinner was torture. Kira sat at the main family table, Weston on one side, Howard at the head, Vanessa across from her. The meal was exquisite: filet mignon, roasted vegetables, wine that probably cost more than Kira's first car. Conversation flowed around her. Guests complimented the food, the ambiance, the celebration, and through it all, Vanessa kept making her little comments. "Such a shame Kira's been so busy at the hospital lately," Vanessa said to a guest. "Hardly any time for family. I keep telling her, a woman needs balance. Career is important, but so is supporting her husband's success." Kira took a sip of wine and said nothing. Let Vanessa talk. Let her enjoy these last moments of social superiority. In less than an hour, she'd be the one everyone was talking about. And not in admiration. "I'm sure Kira and Weston will be starting a family soon," another guest said kindly. "You two would make beautiful babies." Weston reached over and squeezed Kira's hand. "All in good time," he said smoothly. Under the table, Kira's other hand clenched into a fist. The hypocrisy was suffocating. He'd hold her hand at dinner and then sneak off to meet Vanessa afterward. He'd talk about their future family while actively destroying their present. The lies were so casual, so practiced. How long had he been living this double life? How long had he looked at Kira and seen nothing but an obstacle to what he really wanted? After dinner, everyone moved to the grand living room for Howard's speech and the presentation. This was it. The moment everything would change. Kira's heart hammered against her ribs, but outwardly she remained calm, serene even. She positioned herself near the back of the room, purse in hand, fingers wrapped around the remote control inside. The room was magnificent. High ceilings, crystal chandelier, walls adorned with what appeared to be family portraits. Several guests were already standing near those portraits, champagne in hand, admiring them. A few had moved closer, squinting, confused expressions starting to form. But before anyone could say anything, Howard tapped his crystal glass. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began, his voice warm with pride. The room quieted, attention shifting to the patriarch. "This is a special occasion for our family. I'm proud to officially announce that my son Weston will be taking on a new leadership role in our company." Applause. Smiles. Weston stood beside his father, looking every inch the successful young executive. Vanessa beamed at both of them, the picture of familial pride. If you didn't know better, you'd think this was the most loving, loyal family in Maple Falls. Howard continued, "Weston has worked hard to earn this position. He's shown dedication, intelligence, and the kind of character that makes me proud to call him my son." Kira almost laughed at that. Character. If only Howard knew. "We've prepared a little slideshow of memories to celebrate Weston and our family. Vanessa, would you do the honors?" "Of course, darling," Vanessa replied, moving toward the light controls. She dimmed them with practiced elegance, basking in her role as matriarch. The projector hummed to life, and the first images appeared on the wall. Baby Weston on Howard's shoulders, graduation photos, business achievements. The audience made appreciative sounds. This was nice, safe, exactly what you'd expect at such an event. Kira counted in her head. She knew the sequence. 10 minutes of wholesome memories, and then... But she didn't need to wait. Something was already happening. A woman near the left wall gasped. Then another guest let out a startled exclamation. Heads turned. People moved closer to the portraits, and in the dim light, someone's face went white. Another guest pointed, mouth open in shock. "What is—" someone started to say. The slideshow continued for another minute. Weston's first business award, a family Christmas, and then the screen went black for a moment. Kira held her breath. This was it. She didn't even need to use the remote. The sequence was already running. The image that appeared next was crystal clear. Weston and Vanessa in a passionate kiss, clearly not a familial peck, clearly something deeply wrong. The hotel hallway was visible behind them. The timestamp was irrefutable. Silence. Absolute, crushing silence. Every eye in the room locked onto the screen. For one heartbeat, 2, 3, then chaos erupted. "Oh my God!" Someone shrieked. An elderly woman near the front clutched her chest. Howard lurched forward, fumbling for his glasses, his face draining of color. What is the meaning of this?" Vanessa's reaction was instant hysteria. "Turn it off," she screamed, rushing toward the projector. Her composure shattered like glass, all pretense of grace evaporating. She frantically mashed buttons, but the slideshow advanced relentlessly. Another photo, Weston and Vanessa holding hands over a candle-lit dinner. Another, them in bed together, partially undressed, faces visible and undeniable. People were starting to notice the portraits now too. The dim lighting had hidden them before, but now with the projector casting additional light, the swapped photos were impossible to miss. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone pointed at the mantel. Another guest backed away from a wall portrait, hand over mouth. "Is that—" "Oh dear Lord, how could they?" The room exploded into shocked exclamations. Weston stood frozen, his face cycling through expressions. Confusion, recognition, horror, panic. He suddenly understood what was happening. His eyes darted around the room, taking in the portraits, the slideshow, the horrified faces. Then his gaze found Kira, standing calm and still at the back of the room. "This is a lie," he shouted, voice cracking. "It's not what it looks like." He dashed to the nearest wall and yanked down one of the framed photos, the one showing him and Vanessa in bed. He ripped it from the frame, as if destroying one copy would somehow make the truth disappear. But there were photos everywhere. And the slideshow kept playing. More images, different angles, different locations, a comprehensive documentary of their affair. An elderly aunt fainted onto a couch. A low murmur of outrage and revulsion swelled through the crowd. Howard stood motionless, staring at the screen, at his wife and son caught in an embrace that no amount of explanation could justify. His face had gone grey. His hands trembled. That's when Kira stepped forward. She moved through the crowd with purpose, no longer the meek wife who absorbed insults in silence. In the dim light, her face was composed but determined. She'd been quiet long enough, silent long enough, diminished long enough. "It's exactly what it looks like," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos with remarkable clarity. Every head turned toward her. The deceived wife, the betrayed woman, standing in the center of the room like a prosecutor before a jury. Howard's eyes found hers, desperate and pleading. "Kira, what is—" His voice failed him. "I'm sorry, Howard," Kira said, and she meant it. Despite everything, she genuinely felt sorry for this man. "I'm sorry you had to find out like this. But I could not allow the lies to continue." She turned her gaze on Vanessa and Weston, who stood together like cornered animals. "Your wife and your son have betrayed you. They have betrayed all of us in the most heinous way possible." The righteousness in her voice hung in the air, undeniable and powerful. This wasn't hysteria. This wasn't a jealous wife's accusation. This was truth, backed by evidence, spoken with the authority of someone who had been wronged beyond measure. "How dare you?" Vanessa shrieked, finally finding her voice. She broke away from Weston and advanced on Kira, one manicured hand raised as if she might actually strike her daughter-in-law. But Howard moved faster than anyone expected. He grabbed Vanessa's arm, stopping her mid-step. And in his eyes was something no one had ever seen before. Pure, undiluted fury. Howard opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. He looked from Vanessa to Weston, seeing them clearly for perhaps the first time. His wife, his son, the two people he trusted most in the world. When he finally found his voice, it was broken and small. "Vanessa, Weston, is this true?" Vanessa collapsed to her knees in front of him like a marionette with cut strings. "Howard, please," she sobbed, grabbing his hand. "I can explain. It was a mistake. I was lonely. It just happened. We never meant to hurt you." Her perfect makeup was streaking, mascara running black down her cheeks. She looked around wildly at the guests, seeking sympathy and finding only disgust. "Please, it's not what it seems." Weston stepped forward, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. He looked less like a powerful executive now and more like a terrified child. "Dad," he croaked, we can handle this quietly. This doesn't need to be." Kira laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that cut through his words. "Quietly." She turned to face Weston directly, and the rage she'd been suppressing for weeks finally colored her voice. "After everything, you still want this hushed up? You had months, years probably, to handle things quietly by not doing them at all, Weston. You and your stepmother," she spat the word like poison, "created this nightmare. Did you really expect me to stay silent forever? To keep your dirty secret while you destroyed my life?" Weston's face crumpled, and for a moment anger flashed in his eyes. "You did this to humiliate us, Kira." His voice rose, fists clenching. "You could have confronted us in private, but no, you had to make a spectacle of it. You had to—" Us. Kira's voice cracked like a whip. "The two of you humiliated me every single day this affair went on. You insulted me, disrespected our marriage, made a mockery of this family, made me feel Like I was crazy for suspecting the truth. All I've done is show the truth. If you feel humiliated, Weston, it's because of your own actions, not mine. The room was silent, except for Vanessa's sobbing and the soft whir of the projector still cycling through photos. Guests stood frozen, witnessing the complete implosion of one of Maple Falls' most prominent families. Some looked away, uncomfortable. Others stared, unable to tear their eyes from the tragedy unfolding. Howard's breathing had grown ragged. He wrenched his arm away from Vanessa's grasp, his face contorted with pain and disgust. "My own wife," he whispered, as if trying to make sense of something senseless. "And my son." He looked at them, really looked at them, and what he saw broke something inside him. The color drained further from his face. His hand flew to his chest. "No, no," he gasped. And then Howard Caldwell collapsed. For a split second, the world stopped. Then pandemonium erupted. "Howard," Vanessa screamed. "Dad!" Weston dropped to his knees. Multiple voices shouted at once. Howard lay motionless on the carpet, face ashen, eyes closed, not moving, not breathing. Kira's medical training overrode everything else. She pushed through the frozen crowd, shoving Vanessa aside, dropping to her knees beside her father-in-law. "Someone call 911 now." Her voice was command, not request. She checked for a pulse. Nothing. No breath. No heartbeat. Cardiac arrest. Kira's hands moved automatically, positioning themselves on Howard's chest. She began compressions, counting under her breath, pushing hard and fast. Around her, chaos swirled. People screaming. Vanessa wailing. Weston's voice cracking as he called for his father. But Kira blocked it all out. Right now, there was only this: 30 compressions, 2 breaths. Repeat. Don't stop. Don't think about anything except keeping this man alive. 1 minute. 2. Her arms burned. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Still no response. She tilted Howard's head back, gave him air, returned to compressions. Someone was praying loudly. Someone else was crying. The room smelled of perfume and fear, and the metallic tang of adrenaline. 3 minutes. 4. Where were the paramedics? Then, sirens, distant but approaching. The most beautiful sound Kira had ever heard. She kept going, kept pushing, kept breathing for Howard, because his body had forgotten how. Finally, the front doors burst open and paramedics rushed in with equipment. Kira moved aside, hands shaking, letting them work. They attached a defibrillator, applied the pads. Clear. Howard's body jerked. Nothing. Again. Clear. Another jolt. And then, a beep, a heartbeat. Weak. But there. Howard gasped, a terrible rattling sound. But he was breathing. The paramedics moved fast, starting in 4, loading him onto a stretcher, barking orders at each other. Weston scrambled after them. "I'm coming with him. I'm his son." The lead paramedic nodded. "One person only." Weston climbed into the ambulance, casting one final devastated look back at the mansion, at Vanessa sobbing on the floor, at Kira standing there with blood-stained hands, at the party that had turned into a catastrophe. Then the doors closed, and the ambulance screamed away into the night, red lights flashing. In the sudden quiet that followed, reality settled over the room like ash. Guests began to leave, quickly and quietly, not making eye contact. The scandal was too big, too raw, too uncomfortable. They'd come for a celebration and witnessed something that would fuel gossip for years. As they filed out, some shot furious looks at Vanessa. Others simply looked away, repulsed. Vanessa remained on the floor where she'd fallen, makeup destroyed, body shaking with sobs. Some of Howard's relatives approached her, not to comfort her, but to condemn. "How could you?" An aunt hissed. "Have you no shame?" A cousin demanded. "That's his son." His son? Vanessa had no answers. She just covered her face and wept, the full weight of exposure crushing her. Kira walked outside onto the front steps, her legs suddenly weak. The night air was cold against her flushed skin. She realized she was shivering, From cold, from shock, from the adrenaline crash, from everything. Behind her, the mansion that had never felt like home now felt like a tomb. Evelyn appeared beside her, draping a shawl over Kira's shoulders. "You did what was right, dear," she whispered. "This truth needed to come out. Don't blame yourself for the consequences." But could Kira really believe that? She'd exposed the affair, yes. She'd brought justice, yes. But Howard might die because of it. The family was destroyed. Lives were ruined. Was truth worth this price? Or was the real question, was living a lie worth the alternative? Kira didn't have an answer. She just stood there in the cold night air, watching guests leave, watching the fairy tale completely disintegrate, wondering if she'd just won the most tragic victory of her life. The question that haunted Kira in the days that followed wasn't whether she'd done the right thing. It was whether doing the right thing was supposed to feel this hollow. Howard survived that night, but barely. The ambulance had rushed him to the very hospital where Kira worked, to the cardiac unit where her colleagues fought to stabilize him. She wasn't allowed in the room, of course. She was family, technically, though that word had lost all meaning. So she sat in the waiting area for 3 hours, still wearing her ivory cocktail dress, hands still trembling from performing CPR on her father-in-law's living room floor, and waited to hear if he would live or die. Weston never came out to speak to her, not once. He stayed by his father's bedside, and Kira understood the message clearly. She was no longer part of this family. The papers would make that official soon enough, but the emotional divorce had already happened. Somewhere around 2 a.m., a doctor emerged, not to speak to Kira, but to update Weston, and she caught only fragments: stable condition, extensive damage, long recovery. Howard would live. That was something. That was everything. Because whatever else happened, whatever consequences cascaded from that terrible night, at least she hadn't killed the one innocent man in the Caldwell family. She drove home as dawn broke over Maple Falls, the sky painted in shades of pink and gold that seemed obscene in their beauty. How dare the world be lovely when everything had just shattered? She didn't go back to the Caldwell estate. Instead, she returned to her small house on the outskirts of town, the one she'd kept and rented out after marrying Weston. Her tenant had just moved out the month before. Fate, maybe, or God's way of preparing an escape route. She unlocked the door and stepped into the quiet emptiness, and for the first time in hours, she was alone. That's when she finally broke. Kira collapsed onto the hardwood floor of the living room and sobbed, deep, wrenching cries that came from somewhere primal and wounded. She cried for her marriage, which had been a lie. She cried for the love she'd believed in, which had never really existed. She cried for the family she'd tried so hard to belong to, which had never wanted her. She cried for Howard, betrayed by the two people he loved most. And yes, she cried for herself, for the dreams destroyed, for the trust shattered, for the woman she'd been before all this, who had believed in fairy tales and happy endings. But even in her grief, Kira knew one thing with absolute certainty: she would survive this. She'd survived growing up without parents, raised by a grandmother who taught her that strength came from faith and integrity. She'd survived medical school and residency, years of grueling hours and impossible pressure. She'd survived being the only black woman in rooms full of people who doubted she belonged. She would survive this too. The question was no longer whether she could survive. It was who she would become on the other side of this devastation. The answer started revealing itself over the following days, as the full consequences of that night rippled outward like shockwaves. Maple Falls was a small town at heart, despite its pockets of wealth, and news of the Caldwell scandal spread like wildfire. By Monday morning, everyone knew. The affair between Weston and his stepmother, the dramatic exposure at the party, Howard's heart attack, the photos. God, especially the photos. Several guests had taken pictures of the framed portraits and the slideshow before fleeing the mansion, and those images had made their way onto social media, into text messages, across every gossip channel the town possessed. Kira heard about it secondhand. She'd silenced her phone and ignored the world for those first few days, but Evelyn kept her updated. The public reaction was swift and brutal. Vanessa, once the reigning queen of Maple Falls society, was now a pariah. The charitable organizations she'd chaired quietly removed her from their boards. The country club where she'd held court revoked her membership. Former friends crossed the street to avoid her. The moral outrage wasn't just about the affair itself, though that was damning enough. It was the betrayal of Howard, a respected businessman who'd always treated people fairly. It was the perversion of family bonds, the violation of every natural boundary. And it was the sheer arrogance of carrying on the affair while playing the gracious hostess, while sitting across from Kira at dinner tables, while pretending everything was fine. She tried to show her face at the country club yesterday, Evelyn reported during one of her visits. Security escorted her out. The members had voted to ban her. Can you imagine? Vanessa Caldwell, who used to act like she owned the place, walked out like a criminal. Kira felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, just emptiness. Weston's fall from grace was equally precipitous, though in different ways. Howard, once he was stable enough to speak and understand what had happened, acted with the cold finality of a man who'd been betrayed beyond forgiveness. From his hospital bed, he instructed his lawyers to remove Weston from any consideration for promotion in the family company. More than that, he made it clear that Weston should resign entirely. The message was unmistakable. You are no longer my son in any way that matters. Weston complied. What choice did he have? He resigned his position, and word spread quickly through Maple Falls's business community about why. Former colleagues and business associates cut ties. Investors backed out of deals. The Caldwell name still carried weight in this town, but now it was Howard's name alone that mattered. Weston had become a cautionary tale, the heir who threw away his inheritance for an affair with his father's wife. The divorce papers arrived at Kira's small house exactly 1 week after the party. She sat at her kitchen table and read through them with clinical detachment, the way she might review a patient's chart. Irreconcilable differences, division of assets. Weston was being generous, actually. She'd keep the house, receive a substantial settlement, and he'd cover all legal fees. Guilt money, probably. Or maybe just the fastest way to make her go away. Either way, Kira signed without hesitation. There was nothing left to fight for. The marriage had been dead long before she exposed the affair. She just hadn't known she was mourning a corpse. But signing those papers, setting her maiden name back in place, legally severing herself from the Caldwell family, brought an unexpected wave of grief, because despite everything, despite the betrayal and humiliation and pain, she'd loved him once. She'd looked at Weston and seen her future. She'd believed in their story. And now that story was ending not with growth or mutual respect, or even honest conflict, but with lies and scandal, and a signature on legal documents. There was no closure here. No final conversation where they both acknowledged the hurt and wished each other well. Just paperwork and silence, and the cold reality that she'd been married to a stranger wearing the face of someone she loved. Kira took a medical leave from the hospital, something she'd never done in her entire career, but she recognized that she was in no state to care for others when she could barely care for herself. Her colleagues were understanding, even supportive. Most of them had heard about the scandal and knew Kira was the wronged party. Still, she hated the pitying looks, the careful tones people used around her, as if she might shatter at any moment. Maybe she might, but she'd rather do it in private. The nights were the hardest. That's when the strong facade she maintained during the day would crumble. She'd lie in bed in her small house, so different from the sprawling Caldwell estate, and the memories would assault her. Not just memories of that final night, though those were vivid enough, but memories of earlier times, their first date, their wedding, moments when she'd looked at Weston and felt lucky, felt chosen, felt like maybe fairy tales could come true after all. Had any of it been real? Or had she been playing a role in his life, the respectable wife to parade around while he pursued what he really wanted? And Vanessa, God, Vanessa. Kira would wake from nightmares of those photos, of Weston's hands in Vanessa's hair, of their faces showing an intimacy Kira had never quite achieved with her own husband. The age difference made it even more disturbing. Vanessa was old enough to be Weston's mother. She was his mother, in legal and social terms. What kind of sick dynamic had evolved between them? When had it started? And how had Kira missed it? But she knew how she'd missed it. Because she'd trusted. Because she'd believed people were fundamentally decent. Because when Weston told her he was working late, or Vanessa explained away those private conversations, Kira had accepted their words at face value. Trust was supposed to be a virtue, a foundation of any relationship. But maybe she'd been naive. Maybe growing up in her grandmother's tight-knit community, where people looked out for each other and kept their word, hadn't prepared her for this world of beautiful lies and hidden agendas. 3 weeks after the scandal broke, Kira received an unexpected request. Howard wanted to see her. He'd been transferred from intensive care to a private room and was well enough for visitors. Evelyn delivered the message and offered to drive her to the hospital, but Kira declined. This was something she needed to do alone. Walking through the cardiac unit where she'd worked for years felt surreal. Colleagues nodded at her with careful sympathy. A few stopped to ask how she was doing, and Kira gave the same answer every time. "I'm managing." What else was there to say? That she felt like a ghost haunting her own life. That some days she wasn't sure if she'd delivered justice or just destroyed everything she'd ever wanted. Howard's room was at the end of the hall, private and quiet. Kira knocked softly, heard a week come in, and entered to find her father-in-law looking decades older than the last time she'd seen him. The heart attack had stolen something essential from him, not just physical strength but a kind of vital spark. He lay against pillows, and 4 in his arm, monitors beeping softly beside the bed. When he saw Kira, his eyes filled with tears. "Kira," he said, his voice hoarse, "thank you for coming." She approached the bed carefully, unsure of what to say or do. "How are you feeling?" "Alive," he said with a bitter laugh. "Thanks to you, they told me. They said if you hadn't started CPR immediately, I wouldn't have made it." He paused, struggling with emotion. "You saved my life, even after my family." "Howard, don't." "No, let me say this." He reached for her hand with his trembling one. "I owe you an apology. More than an apology. I owe you an acknowledgement that my family failed you in every possible way. Vanessa treated you terribly from the beginning, and I saw it but didn't intervene. I told myself she just needed time, that she'd warm up to you eventually. I was a coward. And Weston," his voice broke, "my son, my own son. What he did to you, what they did to me, to this family, it's unforgivable." Tears streamed down his weathered face, and Kira found herself crying too. "I'm so sorry you had to find out that way," she whispered. "I didn't want to hurt you, Howard. But I couldn't keep living the lie. I couldn't let them keep doing this. You did the right thing." He squeezed her hand with what little strength he had. "It was ugly and painful and it damn near killed me, but you did the right thing. You gave me the truth. That's more than my wife or son ever did. You know what hurts most? It's not even the betrayal itself. It's realizing I was living in a fantasy. My perfect second marriage, my successful son, all of it was a performance, and I was the only one who didn't know I was watching a play." They sat together in that hospital room, 2 people united by betrayal, and for the first time since the scandal broke, Kira felt a flicker of something other than pain. Not happiness, she was far from that, but perhaps understanding. Howard got it. He understood that exposing the truth hadn't been vindictive or cruel. It had been necessary. It had been the only way to stop living in a beautiful, poisonous lie. Before she left, Howard told her about his plans. He was divorcing Vanessa naturally, and his lawyers had already filed the paperwork. He was also rewriting his will. Weston would receive a small trust fund, enough to live on but nothing like the fortune he'd been set to inherit. The bulk of Howard's estate would go to charitable foundations and distant relatives who'd remained loyal. They wanted the Caldwell legacy so badly, Howard said bitterly. Now they'll watch it go to people who actually deserve it. He'd also decided to leave Maple Falls once he recovered. Too many memories here. Too many people who knew me as the fool who didn't see what was happening in his own house. I'm thinking somewhere warm. Arizona, maybe. Start over where nobody knows the story. He looked at Kira intently. What about you? What are you going to do? It was the question Kira had been avoiding, the one she'd have to answer eventually. What now? She'd blown up her marriage, exposed a scandal, and vindicated herself publicly. But vindication didn't pay bills, or heal wounds, or build a new life. She was 32 years old, divorced, and living in a small house in a town where everyone knew her as the woman from that scandal. Some saw her as a hero. Others probably thought she should have handled it quietly, that she'd been too dramatic, too vengeful. Either way, she was defined by what had happened to her, rather than who she was. "I don't know yet," she admitted, "but I'll figure it out. I always do." Howard nodded slowly. "You're stronger than all of them, Kira. Stronger than Weston ever was. Stronger than Vanessa with all her airs. Don't let what they did define the rest of your life. You deserve better than being remembered as a footnote in their scandal." His words stayed with Kira as she left the hospital and drove through Maple Falls. She looked at the town with new eyes, the quaint downtown, the tree-lined streets, the mixture of old money estates and working-class neighborhoods. This place had been her home for years, but had it ever really accepted her? She'd always been the outsider trying to fit in, the black surgeon who married into white wealth, the girl from the wrong side of town who crossed the tracks and found only judgment waiting. Maybe it was time to leave. Start fresh somewhere new, somewhere she wasn't the woman from the Caldwell scandal, but just Dr. Kira Johnson, surgeon, woman of faith, survivor of hard times. The idea terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. But first, she had to finish healing. She returned to work after her leave ended, throwing herself into surgery with renewed focus. Work had always been her sanctuary, the place where she had control and competence and purpose. In the operating room, she wasn't a betrayed wife or a woman caught in scandal. She was a skilled surgeon saving lives, and that mattered more than any society party or family drama. Her colleagues welcomed her back warmly, and after a few weeks, the pitying looks faded into normalcy. Life moved on, the way it always does. The scandal that had consumed Maple Falls for weeks became old news as newer dramas emerged. Kira learned to live with the stares and whispers, learned to hold her head high when she encountered people who'd been at that party, learned to say "I'm doing well, thank you" with genuine conviction. As for Vanessa and Weston, their fates unfolded like karmic justice. Vanessa fled Maple Falls entirely, reportedly staying with a distant relative in another state, unable to face the social exile she'd earned. The woman who'd once ruled country clubs and charity balls was now a cautionary tale, her name spoken with disgust. Kira heard through Evelyn that Vanessa had tried to reach out to Howard, begging for forgiveness and a financial settlement in the divorce. Howard's response, delivered through lawyers, was brief. She'd get nothing beyond what the law required, and she should be grateful for that much. Weston fared slightly better, but only slightly. He found work at a smaller firm outside of town. Nothing like the executive position he'd lost, and kept a low profile. Some people said he and Vanessa had tried to continue their relationship after everything fell apart, but it hadn't lasted. Once the forbidden thrill was gone, and they had to face the real consequences of their actions, whatever twisted bond they'd shared dissolved. They'd destroyed everything for an affair that couldn't survive in daylight. The thought gave Kira a dark satisfaction, though she tried not to dwell on it. Revenge, she'd learned, was a dish that left you hungry no matter how thoroughly it was served. 6 months after the scandal, Kira stood once again on the porch of her small house, watching another golden sunset paint Maple Falls in warm light. But this time, she felt different, lighter, not healed, healing from betrayal that deep took years, not months, but stronger. She'd survived the worst thing she could imagine, and she was still standing, still working, still herself, beneath all the scars. Her phone buzzed with a text from Evelyn. "Dinner this weekend? I want to hear about the job offer." Kira smiled. The job offer. A prestigious hospital in Chicago had contacted her 3 weeks ago about a position heading their cardiac surgery unit. Better pay, bigger city, fresh start. She'd interviewed twice, and they'd made a generous offer that she was seriously considering. Chicago, where nobody knew about Weston or Vanessa or the scandal, where she could be Dr. Kira Johnson without qualifiers or explanations. She typed back, "Absolutely, I have news," because that's what this story was really about, wasn't it? Not revenge, not vindication, but reclamation. Reclaiming her identity, her dignity, her future from the people who'd tried to diminish her. Kira had entered the Caldwell world full of hope and left it scarred but wiser. She'd learned that truth, no matter how painful, was always better than beautiful lies. She'd learned that sometimes doing the right thing cost you everything and gave you nothing in return, except the knowledge that you'd acted with integrity. She'd learned that fairy tales were dangerous when they kept you from seeing reality, and that real strength came not from avoiding pain but from walking through it and emerging on the other side. The final lesson came one Sunday morning at her grandmother's old church, the one she'd grown up in across town. Kira had started attending again, seeking the comfort of familiar hymns and the wisdom of the pastor who'd known her since childhood. After service, an elderly woman approached her, someone Kira remembered from neighborhood cookouts years ago. "I heard about what happened, baby girl," the woman said gently. "And I want you to know, you did good. You stood up for yourself. You told the truth when it would have been easier to stay quiet. Your grandmother would have been proud." Kira's eyes welled up. "Thank you," she whispered. That means everything. Now you listen to me." The woman took both of Kira's hands in hers. "Don't you let what they did make you bitter. Don't let it make you scared to love again or trust again. You're too young, too strong, too valuable to spend your life looking backward. What happened was terrible, but it doesn't get to be the end of your story. You hear me? It's just a chapter. A hard, ugly chapter. But there are more chapters coming, and you get to write them yourself." Those words echoed in Kira's mind for days afterward. More chapters. A story that wasn't defined by betrayal, but by how she chose to move forward. And slowly, carefully, Kira began to believe it might be possible. She accepted the Chicago position, sold the small house and most of her furniture, said goodbye to the few true friends she'd made in Maple Falls, including Evelyn, who hugged her tight and made her promise to visit. "You're one of the strongest women I've ever met," Evelyn whispered. "Don't you forget that." On her last day in town, Kira drove past the Caldwell mansion one final time. It looked smaller than she remembered, less imposing. Just a house where terrible things had happened. Nothing more. She didn't feel anger or sadness looking at it. Just a distant kind of pity for everyone who'd lived there, including her younger self who'd believed in fairy tales. Then she drove away and didn't look back. Chicago welcomed her with bitter wind and endless possibilities. The hospital was everything they'd promised. Cutting-edge facilities, brilliant colleagues, challenging cases. Kira threw herself into work with passion she hadn't felt in years. She found a small apartment with a view of the city, joined a local church with a choir that made her cry the first time she heard them, and slowly, painfully, began building a life that was entirely her own. Did she date again? Eventually, cautiously, with walls up and questions ready, and a promise to herself that she'd never again ignore red flags for the sake of keeping peace. Did she trust easily? No. The betrayal had left scars that would never fully fade, but she learned to live with those scars, to see them not as weaknesses, but as evidence that she'd survived something that should have broken her. And the scandal? In Chicago, nobody knew or cared about what had happened in a small Midwestern town. Kira was just another talented surgeon with a kind smile and a tendency to pray before difficult operations. She was exactly who she'd always been, underneath everything else, faithful, strong, determined, and unwilling to settle for less than she deserved. So here's what I need you to understand. This story doesn't have a happy ending in the traditional sense. Kira didn't find a better man who restored her faith in love. She didn't become a billionaire herself or get ultimate revenge on Vanessa and Weston. Real life isn't that neat. But she got something more valuable than any of that. She got herself back. She got the truth. And she got the freedom to start writing her own story, on her own terms, without compromise or apology. Because that's what this was really about from the beginning. A woman who refused to let lies define her reality. Who stood up and said no more, even when it cost her everything. Who chose painful truth over comfortable lies. And walked through fire to get to the other side. That's not a fairy tale. That's something better. That's real courage. Real strength. real integrity. And if you're listening to this story and recognizing pieces of your own life, if you're in a situation where you're being diminished, disrespected, or deceived, then hear this: you deserve better. You deserve truth. You deserve to be valued and respected and loved without condition or cruelty. And if the people in your life can't give you that, then maybe, just maybe, it's time to do what Kira did. Stand up. Speak truth. Walk away if you have to, because living a beautiful lie will destroy you slower, but just as thoroughly as any sudden betrayal. Now I want to hear from you, because your voice matters in this conversation. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and telling a hard truth? Have you ever been in a situation where exposing someone's lies cost you dearly but felt necessary anyway? And here's the real question: if you discovered what Kira discovered, would you have had the courage to do what she did? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me your story. Tell me what you would have done differently. Tell me what this story made you feel. Because these conversations matter. Your experiences matter. And maybe, just maybe, sharing your truth will help someone else find the courage to face their own. And if this story resonated with you, if it made you think or feel or question or understand something new, then hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe someone who's struggling with their own hard truths. Someone who needs to know they're not alone. Because that's what stories are for. To connect us. To show us we're not crazy for feeling what we feel. And to remind us that we're stronger than we think. The truth will set you free. But first, it might cost you everything. The question is, are you brave enough to pay that price?